everybody, and a happy new year to you! I am Merisu the Art Sheep, and today for my first drawing of the year, I am drawing Willy Wonka from the new 2023 film, Wonka. This was actually supposed to be out a bit sooner, hopefully like around actual New Year's Day. However, I ended up taking a lot longer with this drawing than I thought. For starters, the first sketch that I am making currently right now, it just wasn't working out, so I'm gonna erase it like in a few minutes and just come up with something completely new. Second, I've been busy doing some New Year's cleaning, which is something that I don't usually do, and since I'm actually in the mood to do it, I figured I must do it now if I actually want to live in a clean house. And third, I was, seeing the film Wonka. I saw it on New Year's Day, and I had a feeling I might at least have some fun with the film, so I wanted to make this video into a never draw review, like I did with my Hunger Games video. So that is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna draw Wonka while I give my thoughts and semi-review on the film, so I won't be really talking about the drawing at all. Also for this review, no spoilers. Let's begin. Start with a brief plot synopsis. The story starts off with Willy Wonka, played by Timothée Chalamet. Probably butchered that last name, but that's his name. Who apparently is a man who has left the men in the Discord that my brother is a part of too stupid to realize why girls and women find him attractive. So according to my brother's testimony, as I am not a part of the group of twats, I will say this to them before I start the review. Listen up, Discord goons. Chalamet is hot because he's hot, and unlike men who I have been told by Evermen, who are mostly all ugly, again, according to Evermen, that isn't my words, that is their words, Chalamet was not cursed with this. He has curly hair, green eyes, smooth skin, and wears his clothes nicely. Soft, but still masculine presence, and has a fun, boyish charm. Do I have to make it any more clear than this? Okay, moving on. If the dweebs cannot figure it out from there, then they are lost and deserve to die in the titanic frozen sea that is life. And if my brother made up this story, and I am explaining this for no reason, then well, good day to you. Anyway, back to the plot, which I haven't even started yet. Anyway, the story starts off with Willy Wonka arriving to an unnamed town in an unknown country somewhere in Europe. Dart on a map, and you'll get it. Anyway, in hopes of setting up his chocolate shop in the Gallery Gourmet. It's kind of like a open-air mall, I guess. However, he cannot open up his shop until he can afford to rent a space to open said shop, and he cannot afford that until he sells his chocolates, and he can't sell his chocolates without a shop. The ones who enforce these rules are a corrupt group of chocolate cartels, as they're called in the film, who have control of the police chief. The chocolate cartel consists of Arthur Slugworth, Gerald Prognos, and Felix Flickergrubber. I give up on trying to pronounce that name properly. Left with no other options, Wonka decides to sleep on his paradoxical problem. It is here he is found by a named Bleacher, who takes him to his boss, Mrs. Struppert, who runs a boarding house. However, he must sign a contract, kind of like a, terms of service. However, despite the young orphan who works there's warning to read the small print, he signs it anyway. He is then quickly left with a vast amount of debt, which he is unable to pay, and is then tossed down below the boarding house, where he will work off that debt in the washroom with 5 other people, including the orphan girl from earlier, whose name is Noodle, as she was given no real name, and since she had an in on a piece of jewelry she was left with, they came up with that. All 5 of them were swindled by Mrs. Struppert and Bleaches, and now stuck with large debts that they have no hopes of working off. It's kind of like, if I'm making like $5 a day, this is going to be a long work until you die kind of situation. I can't remember any of the ever characters' names offhand besides Noodle. It wasn't that I felt like these characters were forgettable. No, I found them all quite charming, and I personally chalk this up to my lousy sense of name memorization, and I don't think they said the names that much in the film, or at least I didn't notice that. Anyway, Wonka decides to work off his debt by selling his chocolate in secret behind the chocolate cartel's backs, and if the Evers help him in this task, he will pay off their debts. And so, you then join Wonka on his journey to try to figure out how to pay off his debt and pull off his chocolate selling career. And it's a prequel, so we already know he does. And that's pretty much the film. First, I feel like I should talk about the negatives, as I do think if these things sound like they will bother you, then you probably will not like the film. For starters, there is a lot of singing in it, which makes sense, it's a musical. But that said, there is a lot, even sometimes by musical standards. Some musicals have more, some musicals have not so much. And that will either be bad or good, depending on if you like musicals. But even if you do like musicals, you only like them if the music is good. So, how is the music in this film? Well, the instrumentals are quite lovely. As for the singing numbers, well, the singing isn't bad. However, I didn't find any of the songs as memorable as the Gene Wilder's one from '71, which this movie does seem to be a prequel to. I'm not sure if I find myself listening to any of them on their own. I guess only time will tell if I'm like doing art one of these days and I suddenly got the urge to listen to them. Like, I just don't know at this point. I only found myself really thinking two came close to the original's charm and wonder, and even then, if you were to compare them side by side, it's not even remotely as catchy as the original ones, which I'm singing to this day. The songs from that film can be so catchy, they can infest your brain deeper than political brain rot. They're just that good. The only two that I would have listened to on their own are from the original Gene Wilder's version. The Oompa Loompa song, which naturally does have different lyrics, as, the conditions around the song are not the same. But that said, it still sounds lovely, and Hugh Grant does a lovely job at singing it, and Pure Imagination, which does sound nice. However, Chalamet does have quite a different style that Wilder was giving was the original. He's more Broadway style, meaning it's more booming towards the end, a little bit more forthcoming with its emotions, and a tad more polished and kind of modern popish due to Chalamet's voice. Whereas the original one, I would say, sounds more raw and real. I would also add, at least for me, on the first viewing of this film, some parts of the song sounded a bit off. I can't say if this was just because it's me or an actual flaw. I am by far from being a musical expert. I have no knowledge in this field whatsoever, except for the fact that I listen to a lot of music and a lot of different types, from Christian hymns to death metal to Broadway to J-pop. However, I do know what it is I like and when something doesn't quite sound right. I do have somewhat poor choices in my song collection, I can admit that, but I still at least know that those choices are poor, and I know why people do not like them, and I know why I do like them. I can recognize a bad song, like Scuttlebutt, and I do not need a musical career to notice a bad song. But I can also admit that I do have personal preferences and personal taste, and if I actually studied in musical theater slash Broadway musical style of music, then maybe I would realize that there was nothing wrong with this music. Or maybe if I did have that knowledge, I would notice that there's a lot more wrong with the music, and it's just not bothering me that much. I don't know, I will let someone more experienced be the judge. Also, in terms of lyrics, they are pretty simple and sort of childish, not in a bad way, but more in an innocent way, which does fit this film's theme. However, when you compare it to the original, you might find it brings me up to the next point of this film. When I left the theater with my mom and dad, they both said that they really did love the film, and my mom said that she could easily see this being a proper prequel to the Wilder version and saw no problems with it. I do agree that I really did enjoy it, but let me explain the issue I have when you're connecting it to the Wilder version. And I think the biggest problem would be in terms of tone and theme. Now, granted, a prequel and sequel can have a different tone and theme. However, I do think that they should at least flow into the next or previous film, or at least be complementary to each other. Although I did enjoy this film more than Hunger Games: Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and I do think that a lot of things were done quite well in this film when compared to the Hunger Games prequel, I do feel like in terms of themes, Hunger Games did do that better, which this one definitely does capture the joy and innocence of the original. More on that in the positives, but where it definitely does lack would be the dark, cynical undertones that were quite prevalent in the original Wilder's version and the Johnny Depp version. Well, Johnny Depp slash Tim Burton. The film wasn't devoid of dark moments. It did have its moments where it was like, oh, that's kind of messed up, that's pretty dark. However, when you do compare it to the two previous films, it's a lot more lighthearted and whimsy. The theme of this film is pure and innocent. You could say that this is to draw home the point that Wonka started out as someone pure and innocent and then becomes more jaded and cynical with his transformation into Gene Wilder, where then he locks up his factory out of suspicion, but then is reminded about that joy and innocence that exists in Charlie. However, I think you could have had that in the film in other areas, such as like was the villains, but maybe they're just trying to make the entire world more pure and innocent, like those moments where you look back at more simpler days. But I still think you could have done a little bit. The humor just wasn't quite as dark as the original one or the Johnny Depp version. The humor, in fact, like I said, it wasn't deprived of dark undertones. It is fairly more juvenile and child friendly, although that's not in a totally bad way like juvenile and child friendly humor often is. I and the rest of the theater, which was packed, were laughing. It wasn't like it was fart joke humor or the type of humor where you just show your kids something that moves sporadically to make them laugh. It was, proper jokes. I guess to explain my term of what I'm meaning in like themes even further is I would say that this suffers from the same problem that Mary Poppins Return had. But unlike that film, I enjoyed this one. But where they do have a similar issue would be in that they crank up the dramatic level, bring up the conflict, and add an easy point to bad guy, whereas the original one was more of a simple plot about teaching your kids not to be brats and teaching the parents not to create them into brats. That said, I don't think it makes complete no sense to not have the free villains not to exist. Wonka has already been established to have rivals, a lot of them in fact. I forget if Prognos and whatever his name is, Fickerburger, were mentioned in the book. I've never read the book, so I'm just going off of what I was told. I am aware that the Johnny Depp version did lift some more elements from the book that the Willy Wonka version could not or would not do because of either time or limitations in their effects. But that said, I can't remember them in the Johnny Depp version either. But like I said, he has been established to have quite a lot of rivals, so it's not like it's a complete unbelievable premise at all that he would have people who would try to stop him even back then when he was starting out. In terms of plot, the film does not do anything that would contradict the original one. There is no world breaking issue on the story for the most part. In terms of what happens, most things are quite consistent, except for one glaring detail that would be somehow all the diversity in this film will vanish between the 71 version, in addition to all of Wonka's friends. Wonka isn't immortal, from what I remember, so obviously at least Noodle would be alive unless she died of disease or murder, meaning there was either genocide or forced migration of all non-white people, or Wonka got really dark and turned them all into candy. You pick. I don't fault the film for having diversity, and all of the characters are wonderful, so besides that detail as where did they all go, it's not minded at all. I do enjoy it. Now, that was the flaws that I can think of. Let's talk positives, because I do personally find there to be quite a bit prevalent in this film. Like I said, the film really does capture the charm, wonder, and pure innocence that is found in Wonka's world. It might be to the point of where it could be sappy levels towards the end, but I do think that it was done in just the right amount. They allowed the sad moments to exist and be sad without them cutting short, and although they wouldn't probably make me cry, they didn't when I was watching them, they at least allowed them to breathe. Another thing that I can say is very much appreciated since the hacks who are currently running Marvel ruined movies, and now we either have to have a joke interrupting any serious, sad, or emotional strong tone, or just cut it short altogether with something else that is happening. You can't have anything drag on for too long. This film does not do that, at least from what I could tell upon first viewing. And all in all, this film was the most fun I've had in theaters since Puss in Boots and the Last Wish. I did enjoy Hunger Games, and I adored The Boy and the Heron, which is a better film than this, but the feeling that this film left me was, again, something that I could just say is pure fun and joy. Everything was straightforward and simple. There wasn't anything that you really had to think on in a complex way, but that wasn't bad. It matches up with the story, and it was just quite lovely, and it was just very fun to watch. All of the characters were very fun. No one was annoying. They let the villains be villains to the very end and do some quite dastardly things, and they were all quite fun. The side characters were all charming, despite the fact that I can't remember any of their names. Wonka is a very lovely character in more ways than one, as every ever line in my notes consisted with Wonka is cute, Wonka is hot, Wonka is an idiot, and Timothée Chalamet is cute. Chalamet acted very nice and did a very good job, and although it is different from Wilder's version of the character, it did fit with the character that was presented with in this film. I don't like to be too hard on Chalamet since I do know him. Okay, that's a lie. That's a big lie. However, I swear, no joke, my mom says she knows someone who knows someone whose brother-in-law knew him. So, there. I know an actor through a chain of people I do not know and only my mother knows. But I know my mom. Like I said, there was never any moment where he was acting like a jerk or incompetent, which happens to most legacy male and even some female characters. Make them incompetent, make them idiotic, make them a downright nasty person who's just unfun. It happens to all legacy characters pretty much these days. But it did not happen here, and I like that. There are moments where he acts kind of dumb and has a naivety about him that really does get him into trouble, but since this is supposed to be him when he is younger, I have no issue with it. He does rely on his friends quite a bit, but I have absolutely nothing wrong with that. He's just starting out. It's not a crime for him to need help. And where his friends do teach him quite a few things, he is also teaching them quite a few things, especially the girl Noodle. Lessons that are very important, such as having fun, seeing the beauty in life, and creativity, and all that jazz. In fact, the dynamic between Noodle and Wonka was very lovely, and I do like the dynamic of an older man / big brother type and a young girl. It's not done too much, mainly because you have to do it very carefully, as it can be kind of weird and creepy if it's done wrong, but it was not done wrong here. It was done very good, I feel, and I do enjoy that trope quite well when it is done well, and like I said, it was done well here. As for Noodle, as a character in her own right, although she kind of comes off at first glance as an insert do not steal OC, she is very charming and acted fairly well by Kala Lane. They allow her to be a character. There's moments where she's right, there's also moments where she's wrong, and she does go along with Wonka and have her own kind of story, but at the same time, it's not to the point of where it takes over his, and I really did enjoy her. Oh, before I go on to my final positive, I did forget to mention one little negative that I did have. I feel like there was some times when they were doing callbacks to the original one, and it was just like, did you really have to do it? It wasn't like to an annoying level, but I just didn't really see the point to some of them. The biggest one that I can mention that does not involve any spoilers would be Wonka working in a washroom, since that is what Charlie's mother did, if I can remember correctly. And again, that's not a bad thing, but at the same time, it's just kind of like, you just kind of put it in there because it's like, see, they did this in the original, so now we're doing it here. Or, see, Wonka got tricked by a contract, so because of that, he makes his own, like, terms of service that you have to sign before entering into his factory, and that has the same issue that the one that he signed has, so that's where he got it from. That one isn't so bad, but nonetheless, some people might take that an issue. Anyway, now to the biggest positive. One thing I noticed in the trailer is it sort of did the film a slight injustice, making it look like just another cash grab prequel that was stale and had no work put behind it. And with the simple fact that all Hollywood is really doing is prequels, sequels, remakes, or at the very least, things that are connected to a very large IP, like Barbie in the Super Mario Brothers movie, which is something that will have an in-baked audience that will go to see them, and they're not as risky as new and original things. Hollywood has been completely deprived of original things. Now, granted, I haven't seen every single Hollywood movie, and definitely on the smaller scale, there are probably a lot of new and original things. In fact, I know that there is, but on the larger scale, this is an issue. And it's something that even my mom, who is not very pop culture inclined at all, notices this fact. And this film certainly came off as a soulless cash grab with not much work put into it. However, I can safely say that once reviews did come in, I did get an interest in this, and because of the wonder and charm that did slip through in the trailer, it gave me the willingness to offer up some cash and go take a look at it. And I can say now that there was a lot of work put into this film. The sets are absolutely beautiful. There was one moment in the middle and one moment towards the end that were absolutely breathtaking. Although CGI was used in the film and it's not the best at times, I didn't find it awful, and they did blend it fairly nice with the film style. There was a lot more brighter and vibrant colors, in addition to just a lot more stuff that was present in this film when you compare it to the Gene Wilder version, but it wasn't to the point of being oversaturated and overcramped. You could still see things. They allowed the main characters to stick out amongst the backgrounds for the most part. Something Burton, at least to me, struggled with a bit at times. Also, unlike the Burton's version, there wasn't as many harsh, dark shadows or a sense of coldness to it, which, let's face it, that's all Burton really knows how to do, so that was going to be prevalent in the Johnny Depp version. There are plenty of creative moments within the film. There are even moments that are kind of drawn over with like chalk or art, and I think this trend started with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that said, I do enjoy it when it is employed correctly, and I do feel like it was in this film. It kind of adds to that children's storybook vibe that they were going for. So, at the very least, I didn't feel like they were just adding it to be trendy, and if they were, they at least made it work. And finally, the greatest pro out of all the pros, at least for me, would be the dancing and the choreography. Everything was amazing. Everyone moved beautifully, and it wasn't just in the musical numbers, but just in general. Everything was timed very nicely, and it was quite a marvel to see on the big screen. There wasn't any real weird cuts or anything. I think it all flowed beautifully, and I haven't seen movement this great in a musical since The Greatest Showman. Now, to be honest, I haven't seen every musical that came out since The Greatest Showman, and even with The Greatest Showman, I saw it in theaters, and I liked it when I first came out of the movie, but after rethinking more about it, I really don't care for the film that much at all. It's just not my cup of tea, and I haven't come back to it. However, despite despite what I think about The Greatest Showman, I can admit that the film was chock full of talented people and great musical numbers, and I still watch some of those musical numbers on YouTube to this day, and I have some of the songs on my phone, despite my problems with that film. And although the music in this film isn't quite as good as The Greatest Showman, the dancing, I feel, is. Take note, Disney, this is how you do non-animated musical numbers. Ooh, they really could have learned something from when doing any of their crappy live-action remakes. Anyway, moving on. Back to Wonka. Closing off this review, I could safely say, overall, I give this film a 7 out of 10 on the sheep scale. This might go down, or it might go up upon second viewing, but I do intend on getting this physically when it comes out on Blu-ray and DVD, if that says anything to how much I enjoyed this film just from my one-time viewing. And if you want to see a charming, innocent, fun film, then this is the one for you. If you've liked what I've said, then you should totally give it a watch. And yeah, that's my review. Also, another reason I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video is why this took so long to come out is because this stupid review is something I just couldn't get worded right. And so I gave up and wrote a script. That's right. This sheep is on a leash, starting this new year with control. Anyway, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked, do all the YouTube things. If you didn't like, I thank you for watching this far. Anyway, thank you so much. I will be back with another one that is more art related, hopefully real soon. Until then, bye!